Good evening and welcome to our school committee meeting of Tuesday, October 12th. As always, I'm going to call the meeting to order and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll go ahead and read the mission statement. The vision of the Wakefield Public Schools is to graduate students who are confident, lifelong learners, who are respectful and caring members of their community. Our mission is to prepare students for college, career, and community by providing rich and challenging curriculum, high-quality instruction, and educational experiences that meet their individual needs and interests. I don't think we have anybody here for public comment. Do we have anybody on the Zoom? Doesn't look like it. So we'll move on in the agenda. We have a consent agenda, Mr. Markham?
We do. And I am one keystroke behind. I apologize, Madam Chair. I move the school committee approve the minutes of the September 30, 2021 school committee meeting and accept the minutes of the September 10, 2021 school committee policy and communications subcommittee meeting and the minutes of the June 30th, 2021, August 18, 2021, and September 29, 2021 school committee student services subcommittee meetings as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion? Mr. Boudreau, I think you have a amendment to make?
Oh, to the minutes, yes. My apologies,
That's okay.
Miss Lehman. I used AMI on the minutes, so I've since corrected that. And I also reflected that Rosie was starting next Monday, but she had already started about 3 weeks before that. So those are the only 3 edits,
Awesome.
I think, to our documents.
So we're going to clean those up.
Yep.
So do we have to make a second motion for amend? Feeling like we do.
Well, who seconded the motion? So I would be willing to amend the motion if Dr. Piscatolo would withdraw his second, and then we can,
Okay.
okay?
I will, yeah.
Okay.
So let me reread a motion, and with regard to Mr. Boudreau's amendments or edits. I move the school committee approve the minutes of the September 3rd, which minutes?
29th, September 29th.
School committee or subcommittee?
Subcommittee, student
Student
services.
services.
Student services,
Yeah.
gotcha, thank you.
Yep.
Move the school committee approve the minutes of the September 30, 2021 school committee meeting.
29th, sorry, just to make sure we have it on record that.
What?
It was the September
September
29th.
29.
Well, I'm rereading the entire motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
There we
apologize.
go.
Yep, okay.
Move the school committee approve the minutes of the September 30, 2021 school committee meeting and accept the minutes of the September 10, 2021 school committee policy and communications subcommittee meeting and the minutes of the June 30, 2021, August 18, 2021, and September 29, 2021 school committee student services subcommittee meetings as amended.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Christine, budget items.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, you have the first quarter of fiscal '22 in front of you, July through September 30th. As you'll see, we've encumbered all salaries, all known salaries that we have to date. Then you'll see in the grants, we're still waiting. We've submitted all of the grants for fiscal '22, but we're still waiting for to find out from the special ed 240, the IDEA, and the 262 grants have not come in yet, probably by the end of this month in October. Again, and the last page is the revolving accounts. And you'll see we haven't received our first payment for circuit breaker. That's why it's a large negative balance, because that comes in quarterly. That should come in the, you'll see that in the October report. I'll pause. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Sure.
Sorry. Your last notation, Christine, regarding the circuit breaker,
Sure.
is that, the final payments for FY '21 haven't come in,
So this,
or have they?
so it comes in quarterly. The
Right.
first quarter would end September 30th, and we usually get that the first week of October. And as you'll see, I made a note at the bottom, we're slated to receive $1.6 million for '22. So our first payment would be a little over $400,000, and we have not received that yet.
Okay. So then, is there a relationship back to
21?
the balance on line 13 on special ed tuitions? Because that's a very high balance. You've not encumbered much for special ed tuitions for FY
You're talking about the
'22.
first report?
Yes.
Right, we haven't encumbered much because we're charging it all to circuit breaker, waiting for that first payment
That's what
to
I
come
was,
in.
that's where I was
Yep.
hopping to, that speculation.
Yep.
Okay.
We want to spend down some of that circuit breaker and then charge the local budget. Next then we'll have
Good
the,
way.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's a healthy start. That's good.
And then next we have the payrolls for September, and I think we have a motion.
I move that the school committee approve payroll warrants numbers 10 and number 12 as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? All opposed? Passes unanimously.
And no gifts.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. So I don't have any comments tonight, but I do have, I'm hoping that we have our 2 youth council liaisons on the Zoom. Oh, Ali, there you are. Jeez. Ali, did you want to take a minute to kind of introduce yourself to the committee?
Sure. So, hello, my name is Ali Atwi. I'm a freshman at the WMHS. So I look forward to working with you all to strengthen the connection between you and the Youth Council and to cooperatively work toward our shared goals. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Jenna, you look like you're on the way home. Thank you for being on. Do you want to give a quick introduction?
Sure, I'm Jenna Farber. I'm in 8th grade at the Galvin, and I'm really excited to work with the school committee on behalf of these.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Come back. Oh. We'll give it a second. Yeah, I was going to say she must have hit a dead spot.
Spring
right.
Street.
We'll wait and see. It's funny. Oh, there she is. Jenny, you want to try again? We lost you there in the middle. Go ahead.
Is that better?
Yeah, try again.
Okay. I'm Jenna Farber. I'm in 8th grade at the Galvin, and I'm really excited to work with the school committee on behalf of the youth council and all of the youth in Wakefield for now my second year.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna. So I had the pleasure of meeting Ali up at the library a couple of weeks ago, and we sat outside and just talked about kind of how to stay engaged with he and Jenna, and making sure that they knew what was on the agenda and which meetings they might want to come to. And Ali shared a couple of the things that the Youth Council is thinking about for their initiatives, but I'm not going to steal their thunder because we'll have them come back and talk to us at some point when they're ready to give us a little update on some of the work that they're doing and how that applies to students at the Wakefield Public Schools. So thanks, guys, for coming tonight. Hopefully you'll be able to stay on a little bit to hear the survey results, but I also know that it's school night and you've got lots to do, so don't worry if you need to drop off. Okay, so I think that's it from me. Doug, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you, Jenna. Appreciate it. It's so good to see kids on the call, right? And so they're so committed to this work and their civic kind of responsibilities. You know, calling in from a car ride at the age of 13, right? Just think back to when you were 13. Mom, quick, I got to make a call to school committee just so that I can zoom in to check, just to share that I'm excited to work with everybody. Right? These are some really, we're very, very fortunate to have such talented kids that are so eager to work with us. So we feel very, very fortunate. So I'm going to have some comments and updates, and then I'm going to take agenda items out of order. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mask mandate and kind of the percentages. We had talked about that a little bit at the end of our last meeting. And then I'm going to fall back into CPAC, and then we'll do kind of the YRBS survey information, okay? The agenda's a little packed, so we want to try to be thoughtful about kind of just time. And when we go over the YRBS information, there's so much information. If we need to have the group come back, or if we need to have the group join any of our subcommittees, that can happen as well. We met earlier today on Zoom just to talk about kind of an approximate time limit. So we think the presentation about 25 to 35 minutes for slides and about 15 to 20 minutes for questions. But we know that there's a lot to cover there. There's a lot of ground and a lot of information. Without further ado, I'll jump right into comments and updates. So on October 18th and October 25th, we will have a flu clinic at the Galvin for our faculty and staff, which is great. It will be different this year than it has been in years past. There are going to be 2 clinics instead of having vaccinations or flu vaccinations at every school. So our faculty and staff are going to need to register ahead of time, and there'll be more information forthcoming on that. Other calendar items. On the afternoon of Friday, October 22nd, and on Saturday, October 23rd, we're going to have what they call active assailant functional exercise at the high school. And so this is kind of a role play scenario where we will have fire, police, leadership from DPW and the town, as well as school personnel, just to kind of do kind of simulated role play around what happens if there was an issue at the high school. How would we respond? Who would report? How do they report? How do communications work? So it's something that's being headed up by Tom Walsh. And so this has been in the works for over a year, and we're happy to have this finally on the calendar. Other updates and kind of comments. We've been working with CIC, which is the state vendor that kind of manages testing. And so if you recall, in Wakefield, we're doing symptomatic testing and test and stay. So we've had that in play now for 2 weeks. During the first 2 weeks, we gave about 165 tests for test and stay. The first 2 weeks, we had no positive tests. As of today, I want to say we're up to 185, and we had 1 positive. So what happens is someone tested on Friday, they come back on Monday, they took a second test, they're positive, and they're cycled right into quarantine, which is actually wonderful, right? And so we were notified immediately. Student was in quarantine. The program is working exactly like it's supposed to. And for all of the assessments given, those are all days that students were able to stay in school, right? So we feel very fortunate, and we feel grateful to our nurses who have taken this on. It's been a lot for them. We have, through the work of Christine Bufagna and kind of contacting the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, as well as CIC, Christine was able to get a certified nursing assistant to come work at the high school for 4 days a week, and that's under the grant that's coming from the Shower Foundation. So that's personnel to help at the high school level, which we feel like is great. We've also been able to interview and hire a new COVID nurse with COVID-related grant funds, and that will be for the remainder of this year. And that nurse will be helping out at the larger elementary schools. That's at Woodville and Dolbear to start primarily. And we can kind of rotate people around as other nurses need additional help if testing numbers start to increase, right? It seems like at our smaller elementary schools, at Walton and at Greenwood, it seems like things have been kind of under control, but it doesn't take much in regard to a testing load. If you have to test 18 or 20 people in one day, that's a lot for an individual nurse to do. So what we would do is we would kind of cycle personnel back. We would pull them back instead of where there's a double, we'd single someone up and send someone over to help. So that's how that is working. But our nurses have been fantastic. I talked about our testing numbers. Our COVID numbers last week, we had 9 new cases in total, which brought our total so far from September to last Friday at 43 positive cases for students and 8 staff cases. We have 130 students in quarantine and 3 staff members in quarantine, right? I don't know if anyone has any questions about the data. Michael?
Were the 9 all students, or were some of those, you said 9, was that just students?
9 students,
Just students, okay.
no adults, as of last Friday. Aim?
You said the COVID nurse is here till the end of the year, the end of the school year or the end of the calendar year?
School year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when the kids, if they're doing the test and stay, if they test positive, like ones you mentioned on day 2 or whatever it is, is that the day their quarantine starts? Or is it from the first day they were tested?
So it's when they test positive.
Okay.
That's day 1.
That's day 1?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
That's day 1. Or when they're symptomatic,
Okay.
right? And
So if they're symptomatic, test negative, that's technically day 1?
if they're demonstrating symptoms
Yeah.
ahead of a positive test, if they were demonstrating symptoms that led us to believe that they, on a Tuesday were looking ill but tested on Thursday, we would start on Tuesday.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
That's a quick question.
Yeah.
Just a clarifying question. You said, thinking about testing, say 165 tests or 165 students?
165 tests.
Okay. So
Right.
30-ish students. Yeah, so
Yeah.
if you divide that by 5,
Yeah.
30-ish students
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
participated. Okay.
So.
And are the other students just opting not to for the other ones that are in quarantine, or?
So we're hearing from the state that the operating kind of percentages are about 30% average for the state. We're at about 65% of our students have opted in. So there are a percentage of other students who
Right.
parents have not given consent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other thoughts, questions?
Sorry, I do have, because I feel like it's a snapshot in time when you report numbers. So the numbers you just reported today were the same ones you reported Thursday, then emailed Friday?
Correct.
So they're not, except for that one maybe case. Because I feel like I know some parents try to reconcile the numbers, but I just want people to understand that it's a snapshot and it was a few days ago. It might not be what you heard through the grapevine today.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then, so if you have 9 cases this week, those 9 drop off, and then you start 0 for next week. Is that right?
Unless they were carrying from one week into another. So a person can be positive for more than 1 week.
So you don't take them off the positive until they're 10 days?
We don't take them off the positive until they test out,
Okay.
right? Or until they've done their time, they're not symptomatic, and they can kind of cycle off that list.
Which is 10 days.
Well, it could be up to 14 days.
Okay.
But the 9 cases were, you said 9 new cases this week.
Those are
As
new.
of last Friday.
As of last,
Correct.
right, last Friday for that week that started the 4th of October.
So we're required to report to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed every Wednesday. So we're going Wednesday to Wednesday with our numbers. And then on Thursday, we include Thursday, and that's the snapshot that we use for Friday morning to report with the town and WCAT on our live COVID update.
Okay.
Okay?
So the 9 are brand-new cases as of that day, but there could be more that are in the 10 or 14-day window.
So right now, the numbers are probably a little bit lower, right? Because some of these have cycled off and some will stay on.
Yep, sure, yep, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
certainly. So just a reminder that the Mass Association of School Committees, their winter conference is in person this year. It will be at the Cape from November 3rd to the 6th. Dorothy Presser wanted to remind you all of that. I also just want to let the committee know as well, we've been asked to participate in a panel down there to talk about our communications and our weekly Zoom call and how we've been updating the community around COVID. And so more to follow on that. Questions on that?
The date, one more time, Jeff, I'm sorry.
It's November 3rd to the 6th, Michael. So I will send a link to the MASC registration to the committee. Other than that, I'd like to take my topics out of order to start off with the mask mandate and kind of vaccination percentages. This was a question that we had in our last meeting. And so we've been working, so I've referenced several times the Mass DPH municipality numbers for the 12 to 15-year-old age group and the 16 to 19-year-old age group. I've always qualified that by saying, not all 18 and 19-year-olds are in our care or in our schools. So what we have done, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about this, Christine, in terms of how we've compiled numbers?
So I've worked with the nurses at the high school, and we've gone through the student vaccination. The state has a database of it compiles all student vaccinations for schools. So we've gone through the actual database for the Wakefield Memorial High School students' vaccinations. And they've compiled that data for vaccinations, non-vaccinated, and there were some students who'd only had one vaccination, not two. So they compiled all the data, and we're not quite at the 80%. We're actually hovering right now at 75%. So we were actually using Wakefield data rather than using the state data that included, as Mike was saying, the 19-year-olds, who might be at college. So we've compiled the student data, and what we're doing right now is collecting the staff data. So we're not quite at the 80%, but it looks like we're trending in the right direction.
We talked about the one issue we discussed about on the vaccination card with the kids there. So we're not getting necessarily complete data. But we spoke about
Right.
earlier,
So we've used the vaccination database to compile student data, right? And so they're just numbers. We have no identifying information. We just have numbers in grades, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? And so I say 8, it's really 7, 8 if we go back to by age. We're really focusing on the high school, right? Because with the middle school being split in half, we feel like our efforts really need to focus on the high school to get a snapshot of where we are. So we've looked at the MIA database, or the MIIS database, not MIIA, excuse me. But what we're learning is that not all students are in the database. So what that is going to require us to do is to actually go to students and families just to ask if they would be willing to share with us if they're vaccinated, just to kind of give us a sense of where we are in that continuum with students, right? And so I was talking to Michael earlier about what we're finding is that, some percentage of kids right now, I want to say we have about between 40 and 70. Is that right?
Who
are not in?
About 46 to
About
be.
46 that are
counting, right?
not in the
Right.
Exactly, that are not in the database.
So they're in the denominator, they're just not in the numerator yet.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the rate would.
So the rate
yeah.
could creep up to, if we're at 75, a little over 75%, we could creep up to 77, 78, but that's for students. Right now with faculty and staff, we only have about 50% of our staff have returned information, giving us an indication of where they are with their vaccinations. So that's kind of, we're in the process of collecting that information as well. So we know we have until Friday. The way the guidance was written, towns, districts have until October 15th. And what they need to do is they need to demonstrate that they've reached the 80% threshold. And if the 80% threshold can be established and verified, then what that would allow us to do is to make just an appeal with the state to change any kind of mask mandates, right, that are happening locally in the district. The challenge for us and a lot of districts similar to us, Wakefield, Melrose, and a lot of districts in the Middlesex League, where the town has gone to a mask mandate in all buildings. So now we have the state guidance, right, that says mask mandate and the policy from DESE and DPH. We have local towns and Board of Health and municipalities that said all town buildings, including schools, will be masked. And now we have our policy, which is kind of third in the queue, right? So if we're kind of first thing we need to do is establish the 80% before we could even think about making a change. Then the next step would be to talk with our Board of Health and Anthony Choi. So, yes.
Doug, is the 15th the first day you can, not the last day you can, correct?
First day you can.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
not the last day.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly not the last day.
Yeah.
Amy?
Does that percentage, is it district-wide or can it be a school-by-school basis?
It is a school-by-school number,
Okay.
yeah.
And
And it's
how,
all faculty, all staff. So it includes coaches, it includes contracted service providers, counselors, food service, custodial. It includes everyone in every bargaining unit in a building.
okay, not outside vendors coming in?
No.
Okay. And how does this database work? Why are some people in it and some people are not?
So that's a great question. They could have been tested out of state, or could have been vaccinated, not tested, but they could have been vaccinated outside of Massachusetts.
Okay.
And you need to opt in to participate in the database. Some parents, I'm sure, just go on the old-fashioned kind of vaccination card with a signature from a pediatrician when the nurse at school says, have you had your traditional vaccinations? They probably provide a note from their pediatrician.
Okay. So how would somebody know if they are or not?
So we would have to reach out to those students and families
Okay.
and ask if they have proof of vaccination.
Okay. And that's allowed by law?
It is certainly allowed by law.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was a question that we got earlier about employee, as an employer, can we ask our employees at a violation of HIPAA? And it is not.
Okay.
Right? It has nothing to do with HIPAA because we are an employer.
You're asking them, not a doctor or somebody?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
They could refuse to answer, too.
They could.
Okay.
They could.
Yeah.
Right, but with an employee and with our MOU, really we're looking at either you're going to be vaccinated or you're going to be tested. So you have one or the other, right? So that's kind of where we're heading there. But more to follow. So Anthony, go ahead.
Sorry, just two things, hopefully quick. When you say 46% of students are not,
46 students.
46 students, that's
We
that's
just
an
don't
N.
have data on 46 students at the high school.
Correct.
All right, and so those will be the families that you're reaching out to?
Right.
Okay. In terms of, so we see a date of the 15th of like the, this weekend coming up, and we're striving for 80%. Like what is, barring that, it's November 1st, right, to reach 80%. Like we're talking between the 15th and November 1st is we can solicit the state and say, here's our 80%. Can we, remove a mask mandate for this particular building or buildings?
So
That's-
I believe before we would do that, we would consult with our Board of Health.
Sure.
Yes.
But so I'm just wondering on what is the work being done? What is the lift to try and meet that, like that 15 date? Seems like that's a lot of work, as opposed to that 2-week period. Would it be better attempt to refocus on sort of just collecting the data or doing other things where that date's coming anyway in 2 weeks? And so do we aim for that, or are we wasting our effort shooting for the 15th?
So what we're doing right now is we're trying to get the best, most accurate data that we can get. That's kind of our focus. That's going to be our focus tomorrow, up until the 15th, past the 15th. We're going to continue to try to collect data to get the most accurate number, the N, that we can get. And so what's also highlighting itself is it looks like a number of students have yet to be vaccinated. Like we have to kind of support and reach out to the 46 that aren't in the database, and they could be, and that number would become part of the numerator, right? And like Michael says, in the overall percentage. But then we would do the same thing with the 170 that have looked like they're yet to be tested. So the effort is broad in that we want to confirm if students have been vaccinated. If they haven't, we want to try to reach out to them to see if they have a desire to be vaccinated and how we might be able to support them. And if the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, the question is there any support that we might be able to provide, or any information that we might be able to provide, right? That might have families and students feel more secure and safe to participate and get the vaccination. And then we're just, again, chipping away at the number, because in the parallel to that, we have to do it with adults as well.
Okay.
I think Stephen's question, and I have this question too, is on November 1st, what happens? Like, do we expect that the state is going to extend the mandated mask with the, if you're at 80%, you can submit and ask,
Yeah.
I think that's the working assumption, is that they're going to extend that again.
I thought that what was going to happen on November 1st is that if you've reached 80%, you're good. I think with the 15th is if you want to compile your evidence and present it specially and be exempted for those
Got it.
2 weeks, you can do that as well.
But you still have to compile the data, which is what these guys are doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're working to a Friday deadline.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
So on November 1st, if we were at 80% and we were approaching November 1st, we would still, this group would work with our local Board of Health to get feedback around where we are with transmission rates. What does the town look like? What does the town look like overall? And then we would take a recommendation from the Board of Health. Then we would take that and say, does this board, this committee, feel like based on the information we have, that we should change our policy or amend our policy? Or do we feel like we should kind of take whatever recommendation the Board of Health makes and kind of wait and kind of give it a stay? My working assumption is, and I know Anthony is on the call here and he only has about 10 minutes to be with us. He's in between every week, he's with us, right? And so, but my working assumption is that if we reach the 80%, we still have to have several conversations before any changes are made.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Anthony, I'm wondering if you can kind of share your perspective based on the conversation that you're hearing from the Board of Health.
Sure. First of all, thank you for your time today, everyone. I just want to chime in a little bit in terms of, that 80%. So I guess one of the questions I heard was November 1st, are we expecting the state to renew the mask mandate? I think the short answer is yes, we are expecting that. As we kind of head into this fall winter season, we know, general patterns are people will be, entering close indoor spaces, we'll be much closer together. There'll be less, there might be less people eating outside for lunch and everything. Those are just examples of, us going back indoors for the cold. And so, we already know the pattern of spreading disease, which is, the closer we are together, the more likely that is to happen. So even though I would like to say that once you reach that, kind of magical 80% vaccination rate, we're safe to take off our masks. Unfortunately, there are a few circumstances that we do have to take into account. So, 80%, that doesn't take into account every age group. And so we do want to make sure that our most vulnerable, those students that can't get vaccinated yet because of age, are protected. And so we have just worked very closely with Steve Mayo, our town administrator. And for all municipal buildings, we do have policies in place where everyone's required to wear masks. and for those that are unvaccinated, they do have to go for routine testing. And so we do want to have some sort of continuity in terms of our policy in the schools as well. We want to protect our students. We want to make sure that, as role models, we're wearing our masks in municipal buildings, and we're showing that this is the best way forward to protect us, for COVID as well as flu season, right? Something that can exacerbate, the risk factors for someone to catch COVID. And so I think there are several policies we do have to look at in terms of the mask mandate being lifted. And unfortunately, 80% is kind of a magical number at this point, and we want to make sure that we're kind of looking at all the factors that go into that before we make a decision.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Anthony and Mike Boudreau, you haven't heard my speech, so apologies. So one of my concerns is, if not 80, what is it? Because people are feeling like this is never going to end if there's no finish line. No one's detailed out a finish line that says, okay, we get to guess. We're never going to get to 100%. But what is the number so that people can feel, okay, we're making progress, rather than having the finish line continue to move and move and move. So I just wanted to get your thoughts there.
Absolutely. And, as I think as Doug mentioned before, we're still trying to compile, as accurate as we can in terms of data, testing and vaccination rates. In regards to that moving goalposts in terms of, where we are in the pandemic and when we can finally go back to what we consider normal, I think we have to look at least internally, at least for the town, once that shot comes out for 5 to 11-year-olds, I think that's when we can start really saying, the 80% really means something, right? And so once that gets approved, and I don't believe it's going to be approved until mid to late November, I think is the kind of operating date right now. I think once we reach that stage where children from 5 to 11 can get vaccinated, or 5 and up can get vaccinated, I think then we can start talking about, how much that 80% means. And so, if we can get, the majority of 5 to 11-year-olds vaccinated in that window, then we can really start looking at, masks in middle schools, high schools, and elementary schools being lifted. And so those are some of the other factors. So just vaccinating children, as well as the booster shot too. We have to look at, the percentage of the population that's receiving that. As we know from the data, those who receive Pfizer shots have been seeing waning immunity, especially in those with higher risk factors for COVID. And so we really do want to look at the booster shot levels in the community, and then eventually, the 5 to 11-year-old population vaccination rates.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Can I just make a comment that Hopkinton got approval from DESE? I saw that today, so it's one we could probably watch to see how that rolls out, if it ever happens, or the high school.
Right, and I think it's useful to have a community to kind of almost test this out for us, and as not great as it sounds, I think to have this data to examine, it will be an interesting thing to watch for us. And each community is going to be a little bit different. Having the opportunity to work with both Melrose or Wakefield, I can tell you right now that both communities are responding differently to this. We have slightly different programs in the schools, but we're seeing different numbers overall. And so I think it is useful to look at other communities to see how that goes. But as I said, I think some of the other pieces, that includes the vaccination for children 5 and up later, and as well as the booster shot coverage. I think those are going to really help determine whether or not it's safe for us to do that.
Other questions? Thank you for the time, Anthony. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep, in 2 weeks.
He's going to be a standard member of our group before we know it. He's been a great addition. He's really been a great addition. And so I know he's really working hard, juggling both communities, because there are some differences. And so it's a pleasure to have him. I'm going to kind of get back into the kind of my agenda. I'd like to introduce Rosie Galvin, who's joining us via Zoom, who's going to be with us this evening with CPAC leaders. And so good evening, Ann. How are you?
How are you?
Good, thank you. Rosie, you want to do introductions?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, I'm excited that this is, to my understanding, the first time that CPAC has joined a school committee meeting. So I'm excited for this partnership and continue to grow and have a strong partnership between these different stakeholders. So I won't speak for long, but I just wanted to really be here to introduce Ann Herzog and Chrissy Loftus. They are the leaders of CPAC who've been doing this work for a while with kind of the goal of bringing helpful resources to students, to teachers, and to families, and really aiming to connect families with students with disabilities and those without. And I'll let them speak about the work that they've done in the past and kind of what their goals are for this year. So I can pass it over to them, but just really excited that we have this opportunity and happy to answer any questions that I can after. But if Anne and Chrissy will kind of introduce yourselves more and talk about what CPAC is and what your hopes for it are, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Rosie, and thank you to the school committee for having us tonight. It's really a pleasure for me to be here with Chrissy, and we have Chris Levine on the call too, who has put in many years of CPAC work. So thank you for having us. I am a CPAC parent volunteer. I have 4 children now. Some of them are grown. My oldest is a junior in college. I have a senior, and then I have 2 at the Galvin Middle School. So parent advisory councils are required by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as outlined in Massachusetts Special Education Law, Chapter 71B. And the purpose of the CPAC is to promote awareness of special education services, to be a source of information and support for families whose children receive special education services, and to work with the district regarding meeting the needs of those students. And Rosie shared with us some interesting information earlier today, just about numbers of students on IEPs and 504s in Wakefield. And her numbers were that about 23.6% of students in Wakefield have a disability that is served either by an IEP or a 504. So CPAC potentially can serve and support many, many families, and that's our goal. I also wanted to talk tonight just briefly about the experience of parenting a child with a disability or children with disabilities. Some families learn that their child has a disability right at birth. Some families learn that their child has a disability further along the parenting journey, like maybe when the child starts school or sometime later than that. And some families have the experience of both of these situations because their child might have multiple areas of disability, or they may have more than one child with a disability. Regardless of when you learn about your child's disability, it can be a life-changing moment. It can be an overwhelming time. It can be a frightening time. It can be a very lonely time. But parenting a child with a disability can also be very rewarding and a wonderful experience as you get to see them grow and flourish. You learn to really, truly appreciate what we call ordinary miracles: a first smile, a first step taken, a first sentence spoken, a first new friendship, the first book that your child has read, even though these milestones may be met at a much later stage than a typically developing child. And I think, Doug, I've heard you say many, many times that all challenges bear gifts. And one of the gifts of having a child with a disability is the connections made between families. There's nothing quite as special as a connection between parents of children who have a similar disability. They simply understand, they get it without lengthy explanations, without questions, without judgment. To be truly understood and supported in that way is incredibly powerful. And another gift is the gift of perspective, taking nothing for granted and cheering your child on through each goal they accomplish, big or small, along with their teachers and staff. When I was listening to Susie give the mission right off at the top of the meeting, I think the Wakefield School Committee's mission statement aligns with what we believe most parents want for their children, that they grow up to be confident, lifelong learners who are respectful and caring members of the community. And at CPAC, we hope to continue to foster an ongoing sense of collaboration among Rosie, the teachers, the administration, the school staff, and families. And it's really in the child's best interest when everybody is working together to brainstorm, to come up with goals and objectives for the child, and to decide upon what interventions are needed to help the child become successful. We want to continue to be a source of information and support for all families of children with disabilities in Wakefield, and we have a number of events this year that will help us do that. So in September, we had an opportunity to meet with Rosie. She came on to have a meet and greet with families, and we were able to welcome her as well as other district leaders and special education coordinators. And that was a really nice start to the year. It was a very productive evening and helpful for families to sort of reconnect and get some information. Last week, we had a workshop on basic rights in special education by Carol Lombardi, and that was also very well attended and informative for families. And coming up, we have our annual meeting on November 8th, and we're hosting a meet and greet event on November 17th with special education and 504 coordinators, where parents will have an opportunity to listen to what everyone's role is on the team and then have a chance to ask questions and get those questions answered. And then we're already looking ahead to 2022. We're planning a workshop on facilitation and mediation from the Bureau of Special Education Appeals. We're planning a presentation just about the nuts and bolts of an IEP and what that is and what that looks like. And we also hope to provide a social event sometime in the spring, since, as I was saying, there's so much power in parents supporting other parents, families supporting other families. You can learn more about these events on our Facebook page and on our website, which is www.wakefieldcpac.org, or you can also email us at wakefieldcpac@gmail.com. And I just wanted to say it's really an honor and a privilege to be part of the CPAC this year. I'm looking forward to working with everyone, with Rosie and all the special ed coordinators and staff, to best meet the needs of families receiving special education services in Wakefield. And I'm going to pass it along to Chrissy, who also has some words to share. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. It really has been an incredibly rewarding being part of the CPAC. I started participating in the CPAC when my middle daughter turned 3 and was transitioning from early intervention. Hard to believe it's been almost 8 years. But it has, and here we are getting ready to transition into the Galvin next year. So being a part of the CPAC has been awarded me the ability to make connections with both within and outside of the Wakefield public school system, which has helped me navigate this scary and ever-changing world of special education. Our experience in special education is different than most, and I have seen firsthand the benefits of both inclusion and substantially separate classrooms. And what I can unequivocally say is that all children, not just those in IEPs and 504s, have benefited from special education. Like Ann said earlier, 23.6% of our population is either on an IEP or a 504. With that comes benefits to not only special education students, but also the general education students as well. Things like lesson modifications, accommodations, extra support staff, the list could go on and on. They're also learning patience, understanding, compassion, and so much more. I bring this up because, much like the benefits of the classroom, the CPAC benefits parents of children that are in general education as well as our special education students. Some of our presentations have included people like Sarah Ward on topics like executive function, which I found hugely beneficial to myself, let alone any of my kids. I encourage you to check out some of our presentations regardless of your children's needs. I promise you will come out of it with some valuable information. So thank you very much for having us tonight.
Thank you, Chrissy. Chris, any words?
I'm just really happy that Ann and Chrissy have taken it on. I think they're going to do a rock star job, and I'm here to support them in any way I can.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For any parents that might be watching tonight, if you want to learn more about special education, or if you have questions about your child's IEP or how they might be learning or how you might be able to support them, the CPAC is just a wonderful, wonderful resource. They are moms, they're volunteers, they're connected to the community and the schools, but most importantly, I think that they're great, a great system of support and great kind of educators to kind of help parents when they're trying to navigate all that comes with the information of learning that your child has a disability. So to you all, thank you so much for joining us. We're grateful that you could be here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. That was super informative. All right.
So any questions for the CPAC before we shift gears?
Just a comment, I grew up in a community where there was inclusion of special needs kids from kindergarten.
Yep.
And they're right, it affects children who are not part of the special education program as much as it does
You're
those that are.
absolutely correct.
You get a level of empathy, understanding, caring. So I applaud you, what you're doing.
Yeah, it's really something special to watch. Yeah.
We see that at the Doyle School too,
You
big time.
you see it brilliantly at the Doyle,
Yeah.
right? And Chrissy, when I first came to the district, Chrissy had no idea who I was. And she introduced herself and she said, my daughter has some needs and, I never thought she could go to school here. Chrissy, do you remember this? I don't know if you...
Oh, I remember. It's the first time, well, it was one of the first of many times we've admitted that we were wrong and we didn't think Wakefield was appropriate for Maddie. And we've been proven wrong and we've been blessed to have the people in our lives. I love Doyle so much that I just couldn't leave. So now I'm here too.
Yeah.
She's in my daughter's classroom.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It's and we're better because your family is here and because Maddie's in our school system. So I won't go on and on. I'll kind of leave that there, but thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
She's a pretty special kid. She leaves a mark everywhere she goes, for sure.
Sure does.
There's no question about it. There's no question about it. Thank you again for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Have a good night, you guys.
So next up, I'd like to welcome Catherine Dingra, Brendan Kent, and Andrew Tetrault to come up to our table here. So Catherine is our director of the Wakefield Unified Prevention Coalition, also known as Wake Up. And so Catherine has irons in all sorts of places. She's working everywhere. Her work with students is just remarkable. It is remarkable. She has worked with our counselors in collecting information around our risk behavior, our youth risk behavior survey every few years, Catherine?
Every 2 years, yeah.
And so it's a pleasure to welcome Catherine, Brennan Kent, our athletic director, and Andrew Tetrault, our middle school assistant principal, here this evening to talk a little bit about YRBS. You should have a clicker on the table.
We do.
There you go.
All right, and I'm just going to make sure. Oh, great. It works. So, good evening, everyone. And as Doug said, we're going to try to keep the presentation to about 25 to 30 minutes, and then get a chance for some Q&A for about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And happy to provide more. So again, this is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, something that we have consistently conducted every 2 years since 2011. So, and what this survey process is, this year we surveyed students in April 2021. And it's done, we've consistently since 2011 done it with grades 7 through 12. So we tried to stay consistent with that. And it's developed by the Centers for Disease Control, and it's done throughout the country, including across the state of Massachusetts.
This year, in the past few years, we've had John Snow Inc., so JSI, which is a nationally known consulting firm. They kind of refined our tool. We, as a team, as a district team, and as the health department lens, we looked at what are the standard questions that we're going to keep, that we consistently keep from year to year, and then we looked at tools and questions that we wanted to add to get an understanding in this particular year what our students are going through. And this project is funded by the Leahy Health. So we're fortunate to have Leahy funding it, because sometimes it can cost districts $10,000 to $20,000 to get this data. 2 years ago, we got together with the Middlesex League, and we really wanted to understand what does our data look like next to similar schools. So that has been very helpful to have that trend data. So we weren't just comparing ourselves to the state and to the rest of the country. We were able to take a look at how our school lined up with other schools in the district. So.
Why 7 and 8? Why not 6, 5 and 6?
For our schools, we kind of broke it down with upper house, and if we dip down to 6th grade, that was something that we decided. That's something that could be amended in future years, but that's something that we consistently did. Good question. All right.
Can I also say that other schools, middle schools, and most of the Middlesex leagues are 6, 7, 8. So we wouldn't necessarily dip into 5. We also, the level of sophistication with the questions also would challenge upper elementary in regard to reliability of data or even understanding of some of the questions.
And then what this survey instrument does is it really helps us understand what are the risk behaviors that our students are going through and what are those protective behaviors that they have. So risk behaviors that we'll go over tonight include alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, mental health, unintentional injuries, sexual behavior, bullying and violence, and then there's protective behavior. So measuring students' screen time, of course, and sleep and academics. And some of that protective factor data is not in this specific presentation, but we have that available, and that will be, the whole report will be on the district website. So you'll be able to, we all often look at physical activity and things like that as important measurements. So that is the survey instrument. And this is the #1 question we get. Do students tell the truth? Well, if students didn't tell the truth, they're really dialing back 2 years and lying at the same exact levels every year or close to it. No. According to the CDC, research indicates the data of this nature may be gathered credibly from adolescents. And really one thing that some districts do, we don't do this, but some districts will ask, did you tell the truth on this survey? And students will say, yes. Do you think your peers told the truth on this survey? No. So it's a good way to say they're taking it seriously, but they're not sure everyone else is. And we'll talk about a few other strategies to make sure that we're getting valid data from this. So the data collection here. So parents were able to review the survey. So we actually have to keep it in a hard copy in the school offices. So it was available at the Galvin and at the high school, so parents could go and review the tool and opt out. And we always have parents that opt out of having their child participate. Students can opt out at any time. Questions are designed to be short enough so it's not too complicated. And participation is voluntary for students. And everything is completely anonymous. It's designed not to get birth dates or anything like that, so we can kind of track back to any information. And the data is cleaned. They put in specific measures to make sure that they can say, well, if a student says this on this and something inconsistent on the next one, they know that there's something going on with this tool. So there are professionals that look at that, and that's why we pay someone else to be an outside evaluator. We don't kind of tinker with our own data. We just get it brought to us. So that is data collection and the data cleaning. And why do we want to do this? We really want to understand how we can kind of, people hear a lot of this data and they're going to be overwhelmed, but really our goal here is to stack up all those protective factors so they really counter the risk factors that young people are, their brains right now are designed to take risks. And we want to pad it up so it's not going to be a hard fall, that they have things to protect them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and why we really want to build up protective factors and why there's a lot of science behind why that we know that youth experience risks, but if they have school and family if they have school and family connections, youth are significantly less likely to have mental health issues, experience violence, engage in risky sexual behavior, and use substances. So we know that we really want it. So that's something where we can build a protective environment in our schools, but we also emphasize to parents, it's what you do at home, it's what we do as a community of Wakefield. And that's why we title this presentation, Our Responsibility to Wakefield Youth. We, as a whole community, have a responsibility to address these factors and everything. So we are going to kind of get right into the data, and we really want to understand, who are our youth? And we looked at the data a little differently this year, and we want to understand, how youth identify gender-wise and sexual orientation, just to give us an understanding of where our youth are at. And this is actually trend data we've done for several years as well. So as you can see that some youth are, I can't see the specific, but you can see that some youth are gender queer or questioning their gender identity, and then sexual orientation is pretty much online with youth throughout the rest of the Middlesex League and the Commonwealth, of where sexual orientation, or a lot of youth are just still trying to understand where they fit. And then race, we wanted to ask this question because then we can also do some, take a look at the data in accordance to race and how students are experiencing things like bullying or experiencing having a safe feeling at school or being harassed or things like that. So as well as our protective factors.
On the past two slides, is there a choose not to answer option, or they have to fill out one of those?
That's a good question. I think, they can always skip any.
They skip it? Okay.
Yeah. Or they say, I don't, on the previous one was sexual orientation, it's I don't know, or
Okay.
I choose not to answer, or something like that.
Catherine, can I ask you one other question? I know all the data comes from this Middlesex League report. And I know at the beginning of the preamble, they talked about the fact that they didn't compare it to prior periods because it was such an unusual year. I'm paraphrasing. But I'm sort of curious why you wouldn't compare it, because, the statistics are stark, there's no doubt about it, but it would be interesting to understand, is it getting worse than it was before, or is it stabilizing? So I was kind of curious by their decision not to have any kind of trend data in the report.
Yeah,
Just curious your thoughts.
A lot of people, a lot of the experts were even saying, don't do the youth risk behavior survey this year because the data is going to be skewed. And
Right, there was a fear. There was a genuine fear. We're going to have the same conversation when we come to MCAS, right? And so
Yeah.
there's this kind of prevalent communication that says, don't compare. If you dare to take this data at all, if you dare to kind of venture into this space, it needs to be kind of grounded in the context of the time.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I thought the skewness might be an important thing to understand anyway.
Yeah.
Understanding there's
Yeah.
likely going to be some skewing,
Yeah.
no doubt about it. But
Right.
I just thought that was a curious decision.
yeah, and that's why we do have pandemic specific data here, and we have that longitudinal data, so we can see, some things went up, some things went down, definitely because of the pandemic, and I think it is important. So we do have kind of both and. So these were some of the pandemic-specific questions that were added this year. And remember, this is a snapshot. This is April 2021. So if we had done this in April 2020, where would have these things have been? And it's also important to remember these are things that our youth are encountering all the time. So it's important for us to kind of, when we're looking at this data, saying, really thinking and remembering to empathize with these are things that young people are struggling with all the time. And this is a snapshot in April 2021. So some of these questions, feeling of fear or anger or sadness. So what I want to point out is the light blue is Galvin Middle School, and the orange is the Middlesex League middle school average. So we can kind of see where we compare to the Middlesex League there. And then the gray is Wakefield High School, and the yellow is the Middlesex League High School. So you can kind of see we're pretty much, our middle schoolers are on par with the rest of the Middlesex League, and same with the high school. And then some areas where like difficulty concentrating and making decisions, we were a bit higher at our middle school level. Difficulty, I'm sorry, I can't see as well, but there are a lot of, the sleeping was off, just a lot of things where we have to remember where our students were back 6 months ago. And then some more of the trend data, physical reactions, worrying about chronic health problems, worrying about worsening mental health conditions. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more specifically. And then looking at some of the things that might have happened to young people. Again, these are things that could happen to them any year, but, student feeling like their families had significant financial issues. This was definitely a concern for a lot of people. We saw food pantry numbers go up. We saw a lot of the economic impacts, and it happened to our children in their homes. And then, if they had, they were left alone, a family member had a serious illness, or a family member or a close friend died. So something that, we had over a quarter of our middle schoolers experience that. So that's something, on top of the pandemic, what they were dealing with a lot of these serious things going on. So it's just important kind of lens for us to think about. And then this is really that mental health. This is what everyone's talking about. During the pandemic, how often was your mental health not good? So this was most of the time or always. So we really want to look at that number. So 27%, so a quarter of the Galvin students kind of had that experience where it was, they were really struggling with stress and anxiety or depression. And then same with our high school, that was even higher. So again, pretty on par with the rest of the Middlesex League, but just something that we've all been talking about it, then we're just kind of seeing what those numbers look like. And then we were able to kind of break it down by race and gender and sexual identity. And male and female. So you saw females experienced at a much higher level. And in Wakefield, we're a bit higher with all of our racial minority populations in mental health. So that's, something that we, think about everything going on with Black Lives Matter and just in general what young people are going through. And then this is for the middle school as well. So again, a bit higher. And if you look at that last statistic on the gender queer identity, really what those young people are going through. All right, so that is our pandemic specific, and I know this is a bit heavy, but we're gonna, kind of get through this and talk about some of the strategies that we've been going through. This is more of the longitudinal data that Mike was asking for. So this is something that we've asked every year, this is self-harm. I know this is tough to look at, but it's pretty much our data here. This is high school. Hurt or injured yourself on purpose during the past year. This is not suicidal ideation. This is self-harm. It's different, and it's something that our young people use to control pain. That we can see that we're still about where we were 2 years ago prior to the pandemic. So still higher than anyone wants to be, but we want to understand that those two numbers, if you look at the longitudinal, are about the same. And then you have the high school suicidal ideation. Still, and you can see on the right is the Middlesex League numbers, but still, a lot of young people in the high school. And I always kind of break down when you see a number like 12% or 9%, and you think about, you have 1,000 students in the high school, well, that's 9% is 90 students. Were made a plan to for suicide. And then we have our Galvin suicidal ideation numbers. So again, that for the Galvin, it trended a bit higher, especially in comparisons to the rest of the Middlesex League. So something that we want to keep an eye on when we're going to talk about strategies, that we're going to talk about some things specifically around suicidal ideation. And then, sorry, this is very slow. Okay, so we're gonna now, I know we presented with some challenging data, but we're gonna talk now about some of those strategies that because we've been looking at this data since 2001, and things that we have been implementing to address and provide resources to young people that are struggling. So I'm going to turn it over to Brendan.
Awesome.
It's me.
Yep.
Oh, Andrew.
Moving on to me. Hi, everyone.
I get the next slide.
Thanks for having us here tonight, right? And so we'll try to be, concise and pretty quick, but also give you a good glimpse of what's happening, what's going on, in, at the schools. So the first two, little images there, right? Increased social emotional staffing, 2 new adjustment counselors, one of them at the Galvin Middle School, another one at the high school, which is great. And so, at least speaking for the Galvin, we have for years been doing an amazing job servicing all the kids. We've really been understaffed. We wanted to try to have the same model that the high school has and have a counselor for every grade for a couple of reasons. One, right, just to increase the ability for a staff member to meet with kids, right, and also to just create those strong connections with kids and have other options for students and adults to develop those relationships. We're also able to maybe loop, right, with kids now that we have a complete counselor for every grade. We're able to actually form long relationships with the kids, and that's kind of our goal at the middle school level. I know at the high school level, they're obviously they're using their extra social emotional person, right, to help support Suzanne Burns, right?
Andrew Q.
Oh, awesome. And then, for the district SEL bi-monthly meetings and the district SEL coordinator, right? So at the high school, support team with our middle school support team are just constantly collaborating all year long with ways to not only support kids at our own schools, but how there are times, obviously, when overlapping occurs, and we may have perspective and some history to give to the high school high school support staff, and where the kiddos have come from and where they're going, and they're able to obviously give us a little expertise on their end as well. Mr. Boudreau.
Question, Andrew.
Yeah.
So if you had an adjustment counselor per grade, so that's the ideal situation, would you have that adjustment counselor follow those kids from the 5th grade through the 8th grade so that they build that continuity, or would they just pass it over to the sixth grade counselor the following year?
Great question. Yeah. So the looping is kind of the way that's the plan for how we're doing it this year and moving in hopefully into next year as well. But we do try to make, you may be familiar, we have the upper house, right, and the lower house at the middle school. And so we will have a counselor with the fifth graders and then loop with them up into the sixth grade. And then when they transition to the upper house, there is a pass off. And then we kind of reset, right, that the person comes back down to the fifth grade and the new person, the new counselor gets the seventh grade. They'll loop with them for 2 years, have that relationship. And obviously at the middle school, one of the biggest things that we see all the time is the kids like going back, right, the eighth graders going back down to see their fifth grade teacher, their fifth grade counselor, whatever, and going back and visiting those connections and those relationships. So they don't ever really disappear, but it's just another person in kind of the bag for the students to go to, hopefully for a trusted adult, right?
So that's not a staffing related issue that's causing that. That way they only do fifth and sixth and then they pass.
Correct. That's just our choice to loop them. No, but now that we have one for every grade, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, our vision for this hopefully will work out.
Thank you.
So, just a point of clarification, we worked in July and August with the labor subcommittee, and we've increased social emotional staffing with adjustment counselors and a school psychologist for testing in elementary, right? Anticipating that the need would be there with students returning during a continued kind of COVID, whatever the year would have been like when we were thinking about what it might be like to open. And this was even before we had this data. So, but.
So that's the first two icons that I've got. Do you want me to keep going with the referral system? I can keep going on the referral if you want.
About the referral system a little bit. So the interface is something that's a school, the schools and the Wakefield or the Wakefield town budget both contribute to a subscription. So anyone in the town of Wakefield can utilize this service. So that's something that is the matching service that provides an individual with matching them with a behavioral health clinician outside of the school, because most students will need a little bit more. Unfortunately, with the increased demand, and this doesn't include our latest 6-month reports, which went up significantly for Wakefield, the wait lists are really long right now. So it can take a couple months to get someone into care, which before wasn't the case. So, but that's happening across the district. So, but that's something that has been, I know that was something the guidance counselors and school adjustment counselors asked for a few years ago, and that's something that the town and the district invested in, and it's proved to be very helpful.
That has been, yeah, and that can't be understated and overstated enough. Like, that has been unbelievable for middle school families. I know a valuable resource, and connections outside of Wakefield, they've moved on and they've looked to try to get Interface, and Interface is telling you they're like 3 years away from being able to take any other new district. So Wakefield's pretty lucky to have that ability to utilize them. And then obviously Elliot works a lot with kind of they get the immediate crisis management should a family need it in Wakefield. At home and things are going on. Elliot is always an option for our families and students of Wakefield. And the last icon you guys are probably all familiar with, but the student support website is a great resource for any parent, student, or even community member. There are so many different links and resources to go to. If you just look that up, Google it, it's on our website, it's on the Wakefield Public website as well. But that gives a list of counselors and different referrals, and it has all the screening that we're going to talk about as well, all those tests. There's a lot of information on there, so I encourage any parents and families to take a look at that.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to cover the next slide. And again, just not to reiterate any facts, but even prior to the pandemic, statistics around anxiety and depression, not just for students, but adults as well, was at an all-time high. And now the pandemic has even accelerated that further. So this has really been a district-wide initiative this year to really focus on this data set. And from a district perspective, WPS Wakefield Public Schools has contracted out a speaker, Lynn Lyons, to run some professional development workshops for our teachers on supporting students with anxiety and depression. No relation to Doug Lyons, I should say, but she's been great. I think her first workshop was day two. Yep. So she was great, and a really great thing for our faculty. Next bullet is just increased parent education workshops and guest speakers. So we were really fortunate 2 weekends ago. Wakefield High School Athletics, with the collaboration of Wakefield Education Foundation, we were able to bring in a guest speaker who I thought was tremendous, Samantha Livingston. And I see some people shaking their heads, nodding their heads. I thought she was excellent. She had a really great story. She's actually from Peabody, Massachusetts. She's a former gold medalist swimmer. And she just kind of told her story dealing with mental health from her childhood all the way up through. She knew at an early age she was a tremendous swimmer. And she said at the age of 15, that's when people started to talk to her and talk about if she wanted to go to the Olympics, she would have to specialize in swimming. And she talked about how that kind of affected her and how she really loved soccer. Soccer was her first love, but she, made the decision to specialize, which impacted her mental health. And she talked about going to the Olympics at age 18 and just all the anxiety that she dealt with and how that could have spiraled into something really bad. She talked about, walking out there in the final heat for the relay, which they won the gold medal in, and how she managed that anxiety right on the spot, which I thought was really great for our kids. And then I thought my greatest takeaway was she talked about her experience then going to the University of Michigan. And she talked about how she was this 18-year-old kid who now, the summer in between high school and college, she won a gold medal. Now she's walking on campus and she's like a mini celebrity, people taking pictures with her, and just all the pressure of the expectations of you're a gold medalist now going into college, you're expected to be the absolute best. And she talked about how she really struggled with that, and she had a shoulder injury, and it just really hurt her so bad, not just physically but mentally. And I thought it was really cool she tied Tom Brady into the story, because the University of Michigan forwarded her to the team doctors, but they also wanted to see a doctor for her mental health. And at first she said she refused. She said, no way, I'm going to suck it up, go through it. And then it wasn't until they said, well, this is actually the doctor that, it's University of Michigan, this is the doctor that Tom Brady saw when he was our quarterback here. And she said when she heard that, she changed her mind. And it was that really helped her, get back healthy again. And she ended up going on to win an NCAA championship. So I went on a little tangent there, but I thought that was a really awesome opportunity for our parents and our kids. Another initiative we're trying to do to increase parent education is I collaborated with Catherine over the summer to create a one-page reference for our parents that we sent out at the beginning of the season, just on facts about, actually from our YRBS, just stating a lot of it had to do with substance abuse, that not every kid goes out and drinks, what kind of supports we have here at the high school, and just reminding parents that they're the most influential people in their kids' lives. So we sent that out. We're also trying to create more education opportunities at Parent University. So I'm sorry, that was a long bullet there. Next bullet is Wakefield High School and Galvin advisory groups and support groups. So Andrew already mentioned at the high school we have Suzanne Burns and Andrea Keogh, our adjustment counselors. So this year, for the first time ever, I invited Suzanne to our preseason coaches meeting with all of our sports coaches, so they know who she is. So if they see someone on their teams, they can refer those names to Suzanne, who can then seek them out in the school. And I'm happy to say we're already getting some hits with that, and it's already been a success. The other really awesome collaboration we've done with Suzanne is through our health teachers at the high school. So she actually went into our health classes last week, Every year, our teachers in the district have to create goals, 2-year goals, and I'm their evaluator. So I met with them 2 weeks ago, and I said, what better opportunity to create a goal than create a goal around our YBS data? And so their goals that over these next 2 years, when we take the YBS again 2 years from now, that this data is going to improve, and they're going to have mental health be a through line throughout all of their health lessons. Do you want to touch on the Galvin groups?
Yeah, so we, during the pandemic time, we put a little pause timeout on our advisory group, which was something that we did every half day once a month. And we had our little community groups, best way to put it, right? A little community group of kids. And so we have kicked that back off. We're starting that again. And so what's kind of been nice is our 5th and 6th grade teachers who 2 years ago, right, had their little community groups put on pause. Well, now they're 7th and 8th graders. And so they had a chance to kind of reconnect with them at our last half day. And like the smiles and the fun, like little conversations that they would tell, the staff. Obviously, we talk about it meaning so much, hopefully for the kids, but obviously the staff gets so much. And it was like, it was crazy to see them, how much they've changed, and just to catch up real quick. So I know they're really loving that. So that's something that we're bringing back as well, at least here at the Galvin.
Next bullet is an evidence-based health curriculum. So when I first started here, we only taught health education in 3 grade levels, and we had no set curriculum. It was just teachers kind of taught what they wanted to. And over the past several years, we've expanded health education from 3 grade levels to 11 grade levels, starting all the way down in kindergarten. We've also purchased an evidence-based health curriculum, the Michigan model, which has an SEL component to it, and we're teaching that SEL unit in every grade level now, all the way throughout. So that's been a huge, initiative for us to address SEL. And last but not least, SEL SOS signs of suicide screening was implemented a few years, 2 years ago. Last year we had a hiccup with COVID, unfortunately, but we're going to continue it this year. And what that is basically, 5 or 6 years ago, the state mandated that we screen students for substance abuse. However, a group of us within the school, administrators, guidance counselors, we said, why don't we also have something for mental health? So 2 years ago, Andrew was actually in this group with me, with our guidance counselors, some of our health teachers. We used professional development throughout the year to plan a screening for mental health at the 8th grade. The goal was to then bring it to the 10th grade last year. Again, we had COVID issues, but this year we hope to do 8th and 10th grade. And I will say, Andrew can speak to this too. I thought when we did it at the middle schools, it was great. We kind of had this home base in one of the project rooms where, as the students were taking the survey, we had counselors there that were getting the surveys live, that if we saw that someone needed help, we could actually get them on the spot help right then and there before they left school that day. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
We're getting ready for it again, and that's one of those things that you saw in the first icon bullet thing, that the high school and the middle school working together, the two counselor teams. And so on those days, the high school will come down and help us support in case there's kids that might need it. And then when we go to do it at the high school, our student support team will go and support them.
Question.
Yep.
Is it only at the 8th and the 10th grade that the screening occurs?
Yes.
Is that a resource issue?
No, it was they needed to have a gap year, and so we knew we did the SBIRT with the 7th grade, and so it was like, we're going to do the SOS with the 8th grade. So there's kind of a way to
in between the two,
have something every year
Got
for
it.
kids.
All right, thank you.
All right, and then this is our longitudinal data for substance use, and we always talk about how we really just people, again, this is one of those, well, kids are going to use anyway, aren't they? And that's not the case. We've actually seen our numbers come down significantly in Wakefield, and we can do a lot of things to bring, I always say, turn down the heat, whether it's education, whether it's parents, or whether it's we as a community, what we can do to turn down the heat and create a safe community and lower those rates. So some of these trend, you'll see a lot of, policy things that impact use rates, but you can see our tobacco rates have come down really significantly. Past 30-day cigarette use is really at all-time low, and right on par with the rest of the Middlesex League. And you see the vaping numbers coming down quite significantly from their high in 2017, 2019. We were really concerned about that. We're still concerned. And again, this was a snapshot. This was April, so things might have come up a bit. And the same thing with our Galvin. So it's trended down significantly with the tobacco and vaping. Marijuana consumption, just to remind everyone, marijuana consumption looks a lot different now than it did back 20, 30 years ago. It's what we see at the high school level. It's more in the use of dab pens or edibles or vaping. So we don't, typically, you'll see all sorts of things, believe me, especially if you talk to some of our high school folks. But, really, that's really what we're looking at. And why we're concerned is that high level of THC and what that can do to the developing brain. And the reason we talk about substance use right after mental health is a lot of times students are using substances to self-medicate. So we want to understand if we can help address the mental health factors and get them help in healthy coping ways, then they're less likely to turn to substances. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So, our marijuana use is continuing to trend down. Again, this is everyone's substance use rates went down during the pandemic. The kids weren't out as much, gathering as much. And then you'll also see the same thing with the Galvin, which is really good. So we want to figure out how do we keep these rates down, and look at what we're doing there. And then the same with alcohol use. And I'm going to show you some other data in a minute that I want you to imagine these layered on the other the other data. So that our alcohol use is coming down, but we still are concerned, that 15% of students binge drank or basically got drunk in the past month. What does that look like, and what harmful decisions are being made during that being under the influence? And then the Galvin alcohol use and then this is the driving data. This is something that we're really concerned about. So students have gotten the message around alcohol use and driving, where we're at 1%. So that's really good. If you had looked at that data 30 years ago, that would have been so much higher. So that's, again, that information, they know the risks and the use rates are down. But we are concerned about marijuana use and driving. And then we also have the percent of students who used, this is texting or looking at their phone while driving. Our rates are higher than the rest of the Middlesex League. What's going on there? How can we get information? So this is just data to kind of think about how, through health classes, through other avenues, we can really get the information across to our young people. So do students believe they're at risk of harm? So again, when Brennan talks about that evidence-based health education, we know what helps drive down those numbers, and it's really helping them perceive there's a risk of harm layered on a bunch of other things. But that risk of harm, again, I said if you layered the perception of risk of harm around use rates, you'll see that inverse. So as the perception goes up, the use rates go down. Our health teachers, our parents, all of you are doing a really good job of helping drive those perception rates higher, especially in the era of legal marijuana. You come out of Logan and you see, a big weed billboard, and what are these young people being exposed to? So the fact that we're able to drive up the perception of harm around using marijuana and cannabis is a good thing. And then the same thing at our Galvin rates. So here, so some of the strategies that we've used and we want to be mindful of the time. Again, we've had that evidence-based health. Oh.
Just
Yeah, I was curious why the smoking was left off of the Galvin perception of risk.
Oh, why the smoking cigarettes or
Yeah,
vaping?
or e-cigarettes. I think both.
Oh,
It was
okay.
on the high school perception of risk, but it was missing from the Galvin.
Okay.
I just wasn't sure if there was a reason.
I'm not sure the reason, but I can definitely get that data too.
Yeah, we had the data before.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, it might not have made it on there.
Yeah. So, yes, we can definitely get that data to you. Again, with our strategies, it's the evidence-based health class, the parent education, we have our in plain sight. We went viral this year, so we have a video live, so a parent can at any time tour a bedroom and see how to start to have those conversations with your young people and how to kind of look for things that they might be concerned about. Again, Brendan mentioned the athletics and the parent sports information. We have a lot of, we talk about like the wide scale education, and then we start to talk about the intervention strategies with our young people that are experimenting, and how do we help them before it's 18, 19, and they're off to college, or they're starting to really develop a problem. So we have the SBIRT, where we do the screening in 7th and 9th grade, and then we have a school-based diversion program that Wakefield was just accepted to a Harvard MGH program called iDecide. So we applied to be a pilot program for iDecide, and we're very excited that Andrew Cedrone and Suzanne Burns will be running the diversion program this year. And we've already had about 8 students referred to the diversion program this year by in-school infractions. Usually it's around vaping or marijuana use. And then they enroll in this program where they have interventions. So they do a group class, they have one-on-one counseling, parents are involved. So they're not spending their Saturdays at detention, they're spending that, getting more dosage over a time to really understand, do we need to put more interventions in place?
I have a question what I said before we explained the year in the football. Why do you not do it for 11th and 12th graders?
Oh, for the SBIRT?
Yeah.
I know it was it was a state requirement for 1 grade in the middle school and
Because you could imagine
high
those
school,
could
yeah.
still happen 11th and 12th grade too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Just curious, yeah.
Yeah, no.
I know that one of the rationale for having it in the younger grades was some people felt that if you do it in the older grades, it's almost too late.
Yeah, you head it off
You want to
earlier,
catch it
hopefully.
early, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is kind of that whole idea of substance use. You're really pushing delay. So, if someone's starting to use in 7th or 8th grade, we're really starting to, what's going to happen as that addiction grows, because their brain is still developing. So if we can push it off, not that we want it to happen in 12th or college or anything like that, but we want to really get students thinking that not everyone is doing it. So that's why we use this data too, is to say, they think, if you ask students that how many students do you think get drunk in a week, and they, think it's 70 or 80%, when you're really looking at, a much smaller percentage.
I just always thought the peer pressure gets worse the older they get too.
Yes.
So 11th and 12th might be areas to still focus on it.
Yes, no, and
Yeah.
that is definitely, I think that's something that we want to do more of, is more strategies at the 11th and 12th grade.
Yeah.
So definitely that is something we want to do in the future. And then our school nurses are also trained in a program that allows them to tell if students are under the influence of something. So that's something that they asked us for, and we funded that training to happen. And I have actually seen it happen while I was just having to visit a nurse. Someone came into the office and they had to do it. I stepped out, but it's being utilized. And then changing norms, like doing our senior night, really portraying a healthy community culture that we don't turn a blind eye to unhealthy traditions. So that's something else. And then we also have a number of peer-to-peer strategies. We know evidence shows that youth hear these messages better from their peers. So we have the youth action teams and clubs. We have over 80 youth involved, and social media. They actually designed a campaign to look at that Wakefield and driving under the influence of marijuana. And the youth are actually working with the state DMV to look at their policies. And so a number of strategies there. And then we have our violence and bullying. Again, the students weren't fully in school, so these numbers are a little we're not really sure what we're seeing here because they were online more, but those numbers went down. And then the in-school bullying, that's at the high school, and then at the Galvin level. And then you can kind of see it broken down by high school versus middle school. This is, there's more data around this that we can share in the report and that will be available, broken down by race and gender identity and sexuality. And then sexual contact against will, that's something that we talk about. We've done a lot with the health classes and respond to really start to identify this with young people and resources, and that it's not okay. Even the athletics program has done a lot around this. These are scary stats, but something that it's important for people to understand that this is happening to our young people. And again, if a young person goes through this trauma, what are some of the things that they might need to support them? And dating violence as well. We have, fortunately, Wakefield Alliance Against Violence raises money to support initiatives in the school. So we're constantly talking to the health teachers and teachers about what can work well there to raise these issues.
Policies and procedures. School resource officer at Wakefield High School in the Galvin. Once again, utilizing our health education curriculum, helping students understand and define bullying. Collaboration with Wakefield Alliance Against Violence. We're having a respond advocate, and increasing clubs and after-school offerings for all students at both levels.
And then our protective factors, we always measure trusted adult. That's a language we've built into the school day, so we've really tried to make sure that students understand what that means. And I think that's actually remarkable that it went up during the pandemic. And then having that parent or someone at home to talk to. And then the Galvin protective factors as well. So that's something, again, the culture of the Galvin is really looking at those. And we talk about other protective factors being school connections. If you're connected to people, we really, it comes down to relationships. If you have relationships with your teachers, if you have relationships with your peers, it makes school, it makes that learning environment so much better. And so we want to get an understanding of, are our students experiencing these school connections? And again, this was a tough time of year to get a sense of that. They were just coming back from hybrid into fully integrated school days. And then this is something I think Wakefield does really well, both at the middle school and the high school level, is participation in after-school activities. And again, for some students, that didn't really happen last year. The drama and some of those performing arts groups weren't able to, we heard that through a lot of our informal information. And then, but we know we're continuing to build these protective factors, and we are really leading the way. We hear from districts all over, especially the Middlesex League, but even Mr. Colantoni in Salem now is saying, Wakefield really does do a good job of building in all of these strategies to address the risk factors, so we can really look at it not just as school, but as a community, and understand what our resources are and bring them into the district so we can leverage things. And they might not cost money, it's just kind of ideas and talking and how can we do this better. And I feel like Wakefield really does a great job, because I'm meeting with people in different communities all the time, and they're always asking. We were the first ones to do interface. We were the first ones to do a lot of these strategies, and other communities have replicated that. So we have a lot to be proud of. But we have more to do, so that's why we're glad you all are here. And if you have questions about the data or any follow-up, we're all available. I also have to do a special thank you to Devin O'Brien, a high school alumni who was my intern this summer, and he did a lot of the data crunching and kind of looking at the longitudinal data.
It's interesting, Catherine, this survey was done in March and April of this year,
Mm-hmm.
so we weren't even back full-time.
Yeah, I think it was
So-
early April, yeah.
Kind of curious how that will change as they get used to the normal routine, so to speak.
So I know we had questions throughout, so if, I know we went a little over, so if there are any.
I'm just curious about sort of how much of this, so I'm seeing downtrends in drug usage. I saw an increase in trusted adult, perceptions. And I'm wondering if there's any hypotheses on whether or not like those two things would have a staying power, or if we think that there were triggers that we could capitalize on. I'm thinking things that happened during the pandemic are like small class sizes. Like did that have an impact on the connection that students felt with their teachers? And then the tobacco use, having your peer group be smaller or having that be less of a smaller peer group, and what happened there? Are you guys even just talking internally about, I wonder what triggered this, or if we can keep this sort of trending?
I know, at least for the Galvin, we had a meeting today after school with some teacher leaders, and this made it on the agenda, but it was at the end of the agenda, so we're going to pick up with it and really start looking at the data. I think our staff hasn't really had a chance yet to kind of dive into like the whys about where are we at with this, how did this happen, and how can we keep the good things going, right? And how do we try to diminish some of the other things happening that don't look so great, right? I do think some of the things that, like Catherine said, the substance abuse and whatnot, it's a social thing, right? And so like in this past year, like there wasn't a whole lot of social, and so right, like that didn't necessarily happen as much, but kids are back together again. So it's like, yes, how do we capitalize on it now?
I think a hypothesis to add to that point that Andrew just made was kids didn't have access to it because they weren't in those social environments, which would drive the numbers down. But now that they're back out again, that's something to kind of be nervous about, to be honest.
I thought the parenting thing was because they were home with their parents all the time. Maybe it was a bigger resource to them because of that. I don't know what the answer is, but.
Yeah. But I do think some of the points you brought up, that smaller class size, and the Galvin created those eye care classes, and the high school did some really, the schools did a really good job last year of understanding that how do we utilize this year to really let students know, having if students were in quarantine, having teachers that were going in and checking in with them and things like that. There were a lot of strategies that, we could learn lessons from and adapt going forward. But there's a lot of national talk too, so that's kind of my job too, is to hear what's going on at the national level and the regional level around some of these trends and bring it back to understand, okay, this is what they're finding out too. And the other thing is we could do some focus groups. We've done that before, where we ask students kind of what was, what do you look for in a trusted adult? What did teachers do? So that's something that we haven't done really before in Wakefield, but we could explore doing some focus groups and bringing in some folks to do some of that work.
Is there any other data that would include eating disorders and things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's definitely some of that data available that we've been watching for trends. So yes, absolutely. And the other thing too is you can break that down to. So if anyone has any special data requests, we can put in requests to the evaluators where we'd like to understand, mental health and eating disorders, or so they can kind of sort that data for us with 2 comparative stats. So we've done that before with substance use, and that's why we know that mental health and substance use are so closely linked, even here in Wakefield. Thanks.
Just a comment and then a question. A comment. This was a great presentation, so thank you very much. And it covered a lot. It Particularly, I liked hearing about the resources and the things that are being implemented. You know, having been a part of this process, probably way in the beginning, as you were kind of talking about those earlier years, and seeing, I think, the things that have been put into place and the work that's being done throughout the district and the support of the school committees that followed, but certainly the leadership now is really great. And it undoubtedly is having an impact. I think some of those positive trends that we're seeing. The only question that I have, and it might be something just you can let me know later, the number of participants, how does that compare to what's been done in the past? Only knowing the total number of survey takers, how has that changed? Because some students maybe weren't in person this spring. Was it a big enough or statistically relevant difference?
They had the option to take it, so I didn't include in this, but there's so students that were fully remote could take this versus in person, so we were able to provide different opportunities for that. So there wasn't a huge significant.
Oh, that's good to know. So it wasn't just in person, someone could
Correct,
do it
yes.
online.
So,
great.
But in our opt-out numbers, we're pretty much on par with previous years. So I actually like to see that parents opt out because I know the information got out there and they saw it. So we did have some opt-outs as well.
That's great. Great job.
Catherine, I have a follow-up to Amy's question about the eating disorders. Is it safe to say that the consultant that you hired, the JSI, do they only compile the data, or do they also look for trends and point out things that you should be looking at because something kind of stands out as problematic?
Yes, so they'll do that. So they clean the data and then they write the reports for us. So
So is it fair to say that if we are not seeing anything kind of highlighted around eating disorders, that there isn't anything kind of there to worry about, or is that not fair to say?
No,
I know there's so much data.
Right. I mean, we could have presented that slide, and I looked at that data, and it wasn't anything that went up or went down significantly. So, but yeah, but the other important thing that Andrew mentioned is that until 2 years ago, we didn't actually do this formal presentation to the faculty, and they said that was one of the most helpful presentations that they had, because they really can understand what's going on, or why we really understand what's going on, because we do it in those classroom numbers. Like, think of your homeroom, half of your homeroom had this, or think of this number represents the whole football team or something like that. So you can think in terms of numbers.
It also is helpful for faculty and staff. We talk about protective measures. When we map connections, when we would get together in schools and talk about, literally go down lists of, homerooms and just say, all right, what kids have connections with what adults? Just go through the physical act of mapping connections. When you realize the difference it can make in regard to protective factors and the data associated with it, it creates a different purpose for that activity. And I think that the work that Catherine has done and Wakefield has helped our professional development, and has kind of offered a different lens or perspective to help people buy in a little bit more, and because they understand the greater purpose and the greater good. So for those reasons, I don't think we can thank you enough.
Oh, thank you.
I have a couple questions. Does JSI create the questions, or are the questions internal?
There's CDC questions, so they, if I wrote a question, that they would kind of like, no, that's not. There's a art to writing questions that we pay that evaluators, and then they test the questions and everything like that. So what we can do, it's like a menu. We can kind of pick, we want to know more about eating disorders, so we'll pick a couple more questions that are evidence-based.
Because I don't know if one of the questions grouped, have you felt stress, anxiety, and depression over the past? And I feel like those are 3 different things. And, stress and anxiety are normal feelings. We want kids to know that these are normal feelings and to work through them. So I almost feel like these surveys actually raise a little anxiety. And I was wondering if we could add a question like, how is your mood now? Like, how are you feeling now? And those kind of put a little optimism into the survey, and see if that changed the data, or
Yeah, that I definitely encourage everyone to take a look at the tool, which is available, because it does ask things a little differently. But that is a good point where how you're feeling now. I've seen that question before, so that actually is an option that we could ask, and it might not be a
I don't know
bad
if it
idea.
would change the data. Yeah, and just separate out those three things and see if that drives it differently, because kids are stressed about schoolwork, but they might not be depressed about their schoolwork, because
Right.
I think that was one of the questions.
Yeah,
that-
so we do have a question about what causes you stress, and and that's something that we present as well. And schoolwork, something, it might be your home life, it might be your social
Yeah.
situation. So that's another important data set to look at
Yeah, what are the
too.
drivers? Yeah.
Right, because it's different for, in some students it's all, and some students it's just
Right.
one or.
Thank you.
So if everybody's okay with stopping, if anybody else has some final questions, let's do that. But I do think it's a natural assumption to think that the Student Services Team Subcommittee will kind of take this up to take a harder look at. Yep. So, yeah, so I think we would look to the subcommittee to kind of dig in on this a little bit more, spend some more time with Catherine and team on it, and then bring back kind of things that you think that the full committee kind of needs to be thinking about in the context of supporting, funding, whatever it is that we can do to kind of further the work that you guys are focused on. This was a great presentation. Sobering, but a great presentation.
Yes.
So thank you, and thanks for waiting around on the agenda for us to get
Okay,
to.
and remember, go out and look at the kids in marching band and out there playing football. Most of our young people are really thriving here, and it's because of the great environment we built and the things inside the school and outside the school. So there's a lot of hope out there. But thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much.
So the last items on my agenda is just to do a very quick overview of ESSER. And so the ESSER grant is part of the American Rescue Plan. So you'll hear a reference to ARPA or the ARP, which is the funds that the town got. And ESSER, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Plan, that's the grant that schools get, right? So we just sent a survey out to the community. Our responses were, we got 779 responses. The survey was out for just shy of a week. And so we're pleased at the number of responses that we've gotten. And we've asked people to prioritize. And the way that the grant was written, it was very prescriptive in regard to what people would like to kind of see more of in regard to support. And so the four areas that were highlighted, and I'm going to cover this in our next meeting as well, right? So, but I will let you know that the four areas that were highlighted were tutoring programs and support, including early literacy tutoring. Academic support staff was a second category, including academic coaches, interventionists, student teaching, residency programs, and paraprofessionals to support students. The third category that was highlighted was an increasing personnel and services to support holistic student needs, including school guidance and adjustment counselors, right? Which I think is in line with the work that we're doing with labor, in line with this work, and we'll hear more about that when we talk about MCAS data and school improvement plans in our next school committee meeting. And the fourth category was facility improvements to create healthy and safe school environments. So those are the four categories that were highlighted. When you look at the grant that was written and how we prioritized resources that align to these priorities, we will cover all of that in our next meeting with a slide deck. We'll have a presentation, and we will go back over that. But that's where we're at. Just wanted to give an overview to the committee and let you know that we've met all the deadlines. The grant has been submitted, and I think we're in a really good place with that. And so I think that in regard to resources, and you'll hear more about this, tutoring outside of school, and kind of support outside of the school day is something that we have really, really worked to prioritize. Starting with our acceleration grant that we had in the summer. If you remember when we talked about early literacy for our incoming K students that were new to the Wakefield Public Schools, and math programming. So more to follow there. I won't go on and on, but that's where we are there. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that. No?
So you took the top 4 from the survey and
Correct.
put that in the grant write-up?
Correct.
Okay.
And I would just add too, Doug, that this grant is for over 3 years. So we have until 2024 to actually spend all of this money. So we have, we can take some time and kind of build over the next 3 years. $822,000. This is the final. We've already spent ESSER 1 last year. We're in ESSER 2 now, which we have the adjustment counselors on. So ESSER 3, we have 3 years to spend the 822. It's the largest of the 3.
So in the ARP grant to the town was $8 million, and they have 3 years to spend that, right? And so the town money. So, for example, the Middlesex League superintendents and town managers and mayors are all in the same kind of position in that the state funding and federal funding has been significant to support students to get back to school. It's been significant to support mental health. It's been significant to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to support students and families to get back. The difficulty that I always feel a responsibility to bring up is kind of the negotiating the cliff, right? Is so with these monies, I think people are rushing to say, oh, we need more, fill it in. We need more teachers. We need more of this. But if you have a 3-year window to support this grant, everyone's kind of negotiating this cliff where if our budget grows at about 4%-ish a year, then you need to look at kind of negotiating what can be sustained over time. And we'll talk about that more when we get into our budget work and how grants will complement our budget, but we also need to they have to be thoughtful and on balance, right? And we need to have a plan for them year over year, right? So if a position is a 1-year position and it's going to be continued, so it would end in 1 year and continue in another, there needs to be great clarity around the funding sources for those positions. So more to follow on that, but I always feel a responsibility to share that because everyone feels like we have unlimited resources. It's like, it's when we talk to Steve Mayo and he'll say, oh yeah, they've spent their $8 million 6 times over. They keep spending it, right? And so it's just not the case, right? And so anyway, that's where we're at. That's the end of my comments. Thank you everybody for your attention and your questions.
Oh, go ahead, Amy.
Ask an update question.
Sure.
Where do we stand with facility rentals for now?
Yeah, so we met last Wednesday. So we met on consecutive Wednesdays. So we met last Wednesday to talk about what the Board of Health had given us. So we met first Wednesday or 2 Wednesdays ago, and then in between our meetings, we met with the Board of Health and get guidance around what we need to do to rent our facilities.
Okay.
Right? And so we're updating that paperwork, okay? And we will put that out likely by the end of the month.
I think you've already started renting.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, because I know band has a Wakefield Basketball Association.
Yep.
So it's
Well, that's what
begun
I'm
already.
wondering. Yeah, with the
So-
basketball, that's what
Yeah.
I'm wondering about.
Nate
They've already
Wilcox,
locked in a lot of
the
space.
president of the WBA.
Yeah.
I don't know if do you know Nate?
I've emailed with him, yeah.
So he and I exchanged emails probably 2 or 3 times. Our last exchange was this past Friday. He was looking for some more gym time, and Tom Bankett was able to move some things around and provide more gym time for him at Galvin, which I think he appreciated.
Perfect.
It's never enough.
No,
Right.
soccer.
Right,
wasn't
it's
the
never
same, too.
a
They're all
soccer,
looking for
right,
it.
and
The
so-
vultures are
Yeah,
swarming.
and so, but I think we're We're getting there.
Perfect.
We're getting there. The other question in parallel to this is volunteers. So our PTO, especially at the smaller schools, Walton, I know Laura Levita at the Walton is so excited to hear about our volunteer update, and that too is coming in the next couple weeks. But Tim O'Brien will be here at our next school committee meeting to kind of close the loop on all of the work that's happening there.
Awesome. Thanks.
Sure, you're certainly welcome.
Okay, so we're going to move on to subcommittee reports. So Finance and Facilities actually has not met. We are meeting this Thursday, so we do not have an update. Tom, do you or Kevin have an update on the high school working group? The high school project?
No. No, I did ask that it be on the agenda, but it was one meeting perhaps premature.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
Not
Yep.
tonight.
But it'll be on there, so it's a standing
That's great.
reminder so that we don't forget
That's good.
to get an update if there is one. Tom, do you want to talk about labor and personnel?
Well, like finance, we have not met since our last meeting, so we are meeting next Tuesday morning,
Okay,
a week from today. Yeah.
okay. Mike, update from Student Services?
We haven't met either. We're meeting next Monday.
Oh, my goodness. Mr. Piscadlo? Wow!
We'll be setting up our next meeting.
All right.
Just for the record, while everyone's feeling guilty about not meeting,
Yeah.
so our subcommittees meet
I'm not.
more now.
No, yeah.
So they meet more now than they ever have in the history of subcommittees, right? And so,
Tom, I think we met about 7 days in a row before.
We have nothing to feel guilty about.
Okay, well, that was quick. Future dates and agenda items. So our next meeting is our next formal school committee meeting is the 26th at 7:30. As Doug mentioned, MCAS, school improvement plans, and it sounds like Tim is going to also give a facilities update. So those are at the very least 3 topics that'll be on that agenda. We also, though, before that, have the tri-board meeting on the 21st. Tri-board meeting is going to be a Zoom meeting. It is Zoom. Okay. And it is at 7, not at 7:30.
On the 21st?
On the 21st. So when I get that detail, I will send that out. Sherry may actually send an invite, because she does for some other meetings like that. So we might get an actual calendar invite. But if we don't, I will be sure to send that around. Okay.
Can I put in a request for a future agenda?
Sure. Go ahead.
I've had a lot of people come up to me fairly recently about CRT and the 2 different types of CRT. And it would be really nice to understand what's in critical race theory, what's in culturally responsive teaching, to be able to sort of articulate, well, what the difference is between the two. Because I just almost
I think that there would be nothing that we would like to do more.
I'm
Right,
not sure
because
that's true.
because this notion of critical race theory and that they're not in fact the same, right?
Yeah,
In fact,
I think it would be nice to have something.
I think
yeah.
we would welcome the opportunity.
Great, thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Don't we have a slide?
Do we?
We had a presentation on this.
So-
There is a slide.
A comparison of the two?
Yes.
So
and the difference.
MASC put out a slide,
I thought it was in
and,
our.
and so did we have a slide CRT versus CRT? Dorothy Presser.
Sent us. Didn't we get it in the mail?
So didn't Dorothy send it out?
She did, but I thought it was.
MASC.
I thought it was part of the diversity in curriculum presentation. Because they brought up culturally responsive teaching.
I know they brought it up, but I don't think that
And-
they actually did a critical race theory.
Side
Because
by
they're,
side? I don't know.
it's so, they're apples and
Yeah.
not even oranges. They're like
Yeah.
bananas. They don't even, they shouldn't be kind of mentioned in the same sphere. But
Yeah, we don't have to have a conversation, if it exists, then
no,
that's fine, but.
I think it would be great. Yeah.
It comes up a lot. lately.
No, I think we could
Great.
spend a couple hours on it.
No, we don't.
It was one of the topics at our summer retreat,
Yeah, it did
Yeah.
come up
and
there.
it did
Yeah,
come up there.
yeah.
And I think perhaps one of the slides to share were some of the slides that we saw there.
I can dig up because there was something that MASC sent all of us.
Correct.
And then she
They
did
have like
talk
a
about it.
newsletter on it.
Yep, there was a
would have received
newsletter.
it in the mail.
Right.
So I can find that.
Okay, that'd be great, thank you.
And then we can talk about getting it on a future agenda. Although
Sure.
Our next couple of meetings are.
Yeah, that's fine, that's all.
So I'll just say one more thing. The culturally responsive teaching is also going to be part of our professional development plan, which we're going to be talking more about. And it's also, there's plenty of information, culturally responsive teaching information on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education website, right? And so it is part of their acceleration programming and how to support districts, but they are very specific in regard to the work that could be done by districts in this space.
We just like what it is, what it isn't.
Well,
kind
they
of
don't,
thing, yeah.
the department doesn't break out what it is and what it isn't, because they don't even compare the two.
Yeah.
Right? They just say culturally responsive teaching is. And they did make in a recent update from the commissioner, they did talk about what teachers should be teaching, and where it might intersect, or you might get questions about critical race theory, and kind of what is the responsibility of teachers. And so I can provide that to the committee as well.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Okay. School committee comments. Amy Lehman?
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to thank the CPAC for coming. I thought what Ann said was wonderful. When you get a diagnosis, when a parent gets a diagnosis, you do feel alone, and the CPAC is someplace you can go and find like-minded parents, and of all the special education parents I've met, they love to share their knowledge, and they're very willing because everyone's been there. So I just want to thank them for coming tonight.
Kevin?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Amy?
Couple of things. One, I just wanted to personally just send out strength and peace to the May family. As a community, we lost Peter May, who was one of our town councilors, who, I think most people knew him, but if people didn't know him, was a phenomenal person. He was always there with a kind word and advice, and it's a big loss to the community. So I just wanted to send peace to his family. Another thing was, Brendan had brought it up, I think it was WEF, Coach Pappas, and I might be leaving out maybe Brendan, with Samantha Livingston had done I don't know the word I'm looking for. Presentation, I guess. Yes. It was phenomenal. It was really, he broke it down a lot of what she said. It was really good. The students, I was actually really, really impressed by the students that were there. There was a lot of them. They were so respectful. They sat, they listened. There wasn't, sometimes when there's kids in the room, you think they're going to be misbehaving. They were so respectful. They asked very great questions. She passed around her gold medal at the end. They were all super excited about it. So it was a really, really great event, and I'm glad that I got to go and participate in that. And I think that's all I had for tonight.
Sure. Doug would like to insert and make a quick comment. Okay.
So just very quick, I'd also like to, just make note of the fact that Stephen Gates, the longtime community volunteer at the Woodville School, you would see him on the side of the school opening car doors in the morning, helping children out of their cars, putting backpacks on, making sure they didn't forget anything in their car, their lunch. He was just a brilliant man. He volunteered at Woodville for over 19 years, and just recently passed away. I think he was at school volunteering, doing what I'm describing, a few weeks back. Literally a few weeks back. He participated in their Veterans Day assembly, was recognized by WEF a few years ago, but he'll be sorely missed. And I'd like to just say if parents or families feel like they can, just please keep the Gates family in your thoughts and prayers.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Mike?
Amy, I was going to talk about Peter too. He's a great guy, so you did it way better than I would have, so thank you.
Stephen?
Yeah, just on Doug's point about Steve, I had the opportunity to to open doors with him through all of last year on Friday mornings, and he was the first face that the kids would see, like sort of smiling in the morning, and he was just to do that for so long for no kids in the district, just like the volunteer spirit that he had, and he'd go from there to like the Odyssey Day School, and then he would volunteer at homeless shelters, and between him and Peter, I just feel like we've lost, you know, some of our community volunteers that you could just feel sort of that void when, you know, when we lose them, and how important that is, the people in our community that give of themselves, and so it's a point of reflection, and so they're both sorely missed. But yeah, I knew Steve. He was a great guy. On a lighter note, my family got to recently watch the marching band in some of their competitions. They just got a 5-star at the MIAA on Sunday, I believe. And a quote verbatim, I had to look it up, from my 6-year-old daughter when she saw them at Landrigan, was that Wakefield is as smart as its music is beautiful. So she's not wrong. And yeah, so she hasn't learned a lot yet, so that's true. And then just lastly, in closing, also yesterday, my family got to take part in an Indigenous peoples sort of educational experience. It was over in Melrose. It was at their gazebo, but there was a person from the Massachusetts tribe that described in great detail what was here before, you know, before Melrose, before Wakefield, and how the people would work the land, and how Main Street used to be a waterway that would lead from that pond that's by their high school all the way out to the Mystic Watershed. And it was so great, and the kids were so captivated to see sort of this living history sort of embodied. And they just soaked it up, and I was reflecting on sort of that work that we're sort of doing in that space, and it just got me excited for sort of what the future can hold, and to bring that part of history sort of to our kids and to our community is just great. So that's all.
Thanks, Stephen. Tom?
I think many things have been said, and I agree with them all, and thank you for saying them.
So the only thing I would say is, if you haven't seen the marching band, I believe they will be performing on Friday night at halftime I assume it's during halftime, at the football game, which is a home game this weekend. So if you haven't seen the marching band, come on out.
Saturday night competition.
Oh, and there's a Saturday night competition.
Yeah.
Here in
These are the
Wakefield?
two big, yeah.
I believe it's in Wakefield again. Doug, am I wrong on that? I think
Yeah.
it's early.
Okay. So 2 opportunities.
Yes.
to see the marching band, or multiple marching bands if you come on Saturday. And so with that, I think we'll make a motion to adjourn.
And if you go to the game Friday, you can also see the football team.
Yes, you could, you could do that.
That would be.
You could do that.
Go Warriors. You know, all right. Anyways, on that note, ladies and gents, I move the school committee adjourn its meeting of Tuesday, October 12th, 2021.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? All right. Good night, guys.
Good night.